verses 17 through 27. That can be found in the New Testament portion of your Pew Bible on page 228. We are assuming, scholars have assumed that James, in this case, is the brother of Jesus. As he put it in the opening, a servant of God, of the Lord Jesus Christ, and he is writing this to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. He was a leader of the Jerusalem community, and while not dealing with any specific pressing issues of the time, he is concerning himself in this book entirely with Christian conduct. Every generous act of giving with every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. In fulfillment of his own purpose, he gave us birth by the word of truth, so that we would become a kind of first fruits of his creatures. You must understand this, my beloved. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. For your anger does not produce God's righteousness. Therefore, rid yourselves of all sordidness and rank growth of wickedness, and welcome, with meekness, the implanted word that has the power to save your souls. But be doers of the word and not merely hearers who deceive themselves. For if any are hearers of the word and not doers, they are like those who look at themselves in a mirror. For they look at themselves and, on going away, immediately forget what they were like. But those who look into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and persevere, being not hearers who forget, but doers who act, they will be blessed in their doing. If any think they are religious and do not bridle their tongues, but deceive their hearts, their religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. And lastly, our gospel reading is from the book of Mark, the 7th chapter, verses 1 through 8, then skipping to 14 through 15, and skipping again verses 21 to 23. This is all found in the New Testament on page 42. At this point, we were in the book of Mark about a month ago, and we were picking up where we left off. Jesus has fed the 5,000. He has sent the disciples on ahead of him across the lake in a boat. During a storm on the lake, he walked atop the water to join the disciples in the boat. They landed at Gennesaret, and he is traveling through that region, teaching and healing in the surrounding area, and he has visitors. Now, when the Pharisees and some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem gathered around him, they noticed that some of Jesus' disciples were eating with defiled hands, that is, without washing them. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they thoroughly wash their hands, thus observing the tradition of the elders. And they do not eat anything from the market unless they wash it. And there are also many other traditions that they observe, the washing of cups, pots, and bronze kettles. So the Pharisees and the scribes ask him, "Why do your disciples not live according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands?" He said to them, "Isaiah prophesied rightly about you hypocrites, as it is written, 'This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines. You abandon the commandment of God and hold to human tradition.'" Then he called the crowd again and said to them, "Listen to me, all of you, and understand there is nothing outside a person that by going in can defile, but the things that come out are what defile. For it is from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come: fornication, theft, murder, adultery, avarice, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, folly. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person. The word of the Lord.
Annie Dillard, in her memoir, An American Childhood, wrote, "The interior life is often stupid. Its egotism blinds it and deafens it. Its imagination spins out ignorant tales, fascinated." And she went on to tell of a childhood experience of believing a phantom invaded her room and intended to kill her. Repeatedly, each night, the phantom entered her room and she was terrified, and she told no one. She finally realized that the phantom was actually caused by the headlights of passing cars. In realizing this, she stopped seeing enemies out there and looked within. She wrote, "The things in the world did not necessarily cause my overwhelming feelings. The feelings were inside me, beneath my skin, behind my ribs, within my skull. They were even to some extent under my control." The Pharisees and some of the scribes noticed that some of the disciples were eating without washing their hands. The tradition of the elders was to wash their hands thoroughly and not to eat anything from the market unless they washed it, and to wash the cups, pots, and kettles. Which leads me to suspect that my mother was a scribe or a Pharisee. For the Pharisees and scribes, the focus was on external things, locating that which defiles someone, making them ritually unclean, as being outside oneself. And all the while, they neglected the interior life, the inner life of the heart, which for the Jew was the seat of the will, not merely emotions. Jesus says that Isaiah was right about them in calling them hypocrites. A hypocrite is an actor who uses the actor's mask to conceal the true self and its motives and intentions. The word person comes from the French persona, which is the mask that an actor wears in order to reveal the character, to show the self of the character and the motives and intentions. The difference is that the hypocrite seeks to conceal and mislead another. The person seeks to reveal the self. In the person, there is a unity and integrity between the mask, the face that is shown, and the inner life that is revealed. The integrity is revealed in the word individual, which literally means someone who is undivided. There's a kind of magic going on here. Sadly, it is a kind of magic in which the Pharisees fool themselves while trying to fool others. In sleight of hand magic, the magician diverts attention, getting the audience to look in one direction while he does his sleight of hand trick away from the focus of the audience. The Pharisees focused on external matters as if that was where evil was located. They diverted their own attention as well away from the inner life that responds to the external, the self from which motives and intentions give rise to actions. Jesus said to the crowd, "Listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside a person that by going in can defile, but the things that come out are what defile." And to his disciples, he explained further, "For it is from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person." Jesus focuses away from the external stimulus to the internal response and the actions which spring from it. It is not as likely to show up with us in the washing of our hands or our food or cookware. It's still around, this sleight of hand misdirection. It's a strong temptation and common practice to focus attention away from our own behavior to the behavior of others as if their behavior either caused our reaction or at least justifies it. The devil made me do it. It's his fault. If you hadn't done what you did, I wouldn't have done what I did. It's the difference between you made me do it and when you did that, I felt angry. The first locates responsibility with the other. The second accepts responsibility for the anger located within one's own self. We may fool ourselves, and we may fool others by this misdirection. As we judge others as being responsible for or as justifying our actions, we say nothing about them, but only about ourselves. James Bergen said, "Judgments do not alter anything or anyone in the universe. Just because you dislike someone or react negatively towards some behavior does not change the person or the behavior you are judging. When you judge another, you do not define that person. You define yourself. Your judgments only say something about you. At best, it shows our likes and dislikes. At worst, it shows much more. And we see righteousness as being only external and not internal. Annie Dillard saw the phantom outside herself and feared it. The Pharisees saw things which defiled as external to themselves and sought to identify all defiling behaviors and avoid them. And they absolved themselves of responsibility for their own internal choices, holding the phantom responsible for the fear, the unwashed hands, food, or pot, responsible for not being acceptable to God. Annie Dillard realized the enemy lay not without, but within. And she saw that the power of choice was hers. And Jesus saw it as well, that what is external does not defile us. It's what comes from the human heart that defiles us. Even if the devil or the other person did exactly what is attributed to them, it does not require that you or I do what we did. The choice is entirely our own. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are pained by an external thing, it is not the thing that disturbs you, but your own judgment about it. And it is in your power to wipe out this judgment now." The Epistle of James talks about it as being doers of the word and not merely hearers who deceive themselves. So I think in part it has to do with how we hear. I remember some years ago listening to an interview with a celebrity who, though not known as an interviewer, had gotten a talk show. When she was asked how she did an interview, she said that she prepared questions to ask in the interview. And when she asked the question, she didn't listen to what the person said, but made sure that she had her next question ready to ask when the person got through answering the previous question. She said that actually listening to the answer made it more difficult. She was, I think, deceiving herself into believing that she was having a conversation. She never made herself available to the other person and was untouched by the exchange. She only heard enough to know when to ask the next question. She was like the hearers who deceive themselves. There is a kind of hearing that leads to what James is talking about. In a televised interview with Harrison Ford, he was asked, "How important to you as an actor is listening and reacting?" And he answered, "That's it. Just being there with the other person and listening. I can't place enough emphasis on it. It's not a trick. It's a reality. You convert yourself from a person who's pretending to a person who is, just by honestly being there." In interview after interview on Inside the Actor's Studio, the actors say similar things about listening. One, whose name I cannot recall, said that listening is making yourself available and vulnerable to the other, with the possibility of change from the experience. Invariably, as they talk about their craft, they talk about developing characters from the inside out, acting out of a persona, not as a hypocrite. That is what Jesus is talking about, living life from the inside out. Jesus, I think, gives the option to keep him external or to allow him access to our interior life, to hear in a way that ignores him or to listen in a way that converts us to those who are real. The Song of Solomon gives us an inkling of the approach of God. There are various metaphors for talking about God's desire for us. One is, for example, found in the poem The Hound of Heaven, which portrays God as a bloodhound who has gotten our scent. The Song of Solomon presents us with another, God as seducer. What I've heard described as God as a lover on the make. I believe it was Buechner who gave that description. The beloved hears the voice of her beloved. My beloved is like a gazelle. And the word translated gazelle is Sabaoth, a name for God, which we find in the hymn, A Mighty Fortress is Our God, Lord Sabaoth, his name. And when the lover speaks, we hear it through the ears of the beloved. My beloved speaks and says to me, arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. God seduces rather than taking and defiling. God seduces not by exploiting our weakness, but by healing us, not by appeal to our deficiencies, but to our best and noblest selves. Not to use, but to take up residence in our hearts, to live with us. We come to the table where there is bread and drink. We can eat because something is eating us, or we can eat to nourish body and soul. We can drink to numb ourselves to our pain or give ourselves permission to feel, or we can drink to remember Christ and our salvation. How we eat and drink this or any food and drink depends on what comes from the human heart. Christ is here, wooing us to the side of wholeness and holiness, wooing our hearts away from the evil and wooing our hearts to the good. Amen.